What if the villains of the Marvel Universe never existed and were replaced with the greatest threats from the worlds of video gaming? How would the Marvel heroes stack up? Who would each of them end up fighting to protect the world, and would they even stand a chance? Today I'll be taking a look at some of the most popular Marvel heroes, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Thor, Hulk, and more, and picking 3 new villains for each of them to face based on their powers, personalities, and themes. I'll explain how their confrontations would go down, what they'd clash over, and then I'll tell you who each hero's greatest enemy would be. I tried to pull from as many different franchises and genres as possible, but just a warning, the Marvel Universe is always at least a little serious, so I didn't include, like, mobile game bad guys. The pigs from Angry Birds will not be featuring as the arch enemy of Daredevil, I promise. But remember, it's just the villains who've crossed over into Marvel's world, so Mario and Master Chief are not here to help. If you don't like my matchups or have a better idea, be sure to let me know down in those comments. I'll try to respond to as many as I can. Alright, let's dive in. Tony Stark is the invincible Iron Man, a super genius billionaire who was forced to see the harm his creations were causing when one of his weapons nearly killed him and filled his heart with shrapnel. He decided to stop selling weapons and dedicate his life to using technology to protect the world as the armored Avenger, Iron Man. Tony has countless incredible suits at his disposal that grant him incredible strength, speed, flight, and near invulnerability from all sorts of harm. He's decked out his armors with repulsors, missiles, lasers, EMP generators, invisibility cloaks, even a system that filters his WAS, because stopping for bathroom breaks would take way too long. A good Iron Man story will pit him up against a villain that challenges him on all levels. They need to be physically capable enough to tangle with a hero that can toss around tanks and shrug off ballistic missiles, but they should also serve as a foil. Tony wholeheartedly embraces technology and the concept of human progress, despite how much his designs used to hurt and kill people all over the planet. A great villain matchup will highlight both the sins of his past and the dangers of the path he's walking into the future. So, which gaming icons did I settle on? Well, my first thought was Dr. Eggman from the Sonic series, another genius mechanic who's crafted technological marvels but is wholly interested in world domination. He even has an AI daughter that he cares for, Sage, which would be a neat reflection of Tony's relationship with his own AI companion, Jarvis. However, Eggman represents mechanization as an opposite force to nature. It's why he's always powering his machines by putting little critters inside of them, and why he always gets thwarted by a handful of colorful animals. While it would be super cool to see Tony tear through an army of badniks and even try to use a Chaos Emerald to power his suit, Eggman is just not a great thematic foil for Iron Man. Instead, my first real pick goes to a different evil doctor of robotics with an overgrown mustache, Wily from the Mega Man series. Dr. Albert Wily is a brilliant but bitter roboticist who let his jealousy define his entire life. Once a partner to Dr. Thomas Light, he helped pioneer advances in Reploids, human-like machines, but when the spotlight always seemed to shine on Light, Wily's ego cracked. He stole Light's robotics and corrupted them into instruments of war, all to prove to the world that he was the superior genius. He's literally the inverse of Tony Stark, and I can see him in the Marvel Universe as a disgruntled Stark Industries employee, frustrated that he was never able to claim recognition for his designs, stealing from Tony's armory and reworking the armors into his legion of robot masters. Metal Man with razor-sharp buzzsaws, Quick Man, infamous for his blistering speed, Flash Man, who can freeze time itself, showcasing Wily's flair for bending physics to his will. Wily would throw all of them at Tony to try and tear down his image in the eyes of the public, and once Iron Man manages to defeat each of the robot masters based on his stolen Stark tech, he'd have to tangle with Wily's machines. Colossal war engines made entirely by the evil doctor's own hands. I think Wily is a great recurring villain for Tony. He has a vendetta just like Mysterio or Aldrich Killian from the MCU, and his obsession with creating sentient Reploids from Tony's non-thinking armor would offer our hero an interesting moral dilemma. Is it right to just destroy these things? Are these AI on the same level of value as a human life? And in that same vein, Iron Man was created as a character steeped in the politics of war. His very existence asks very important questions about the ethics of a private individual wielding military-grade technology, and the implications that can have on a society obsessed with both security and liberty, which is why I think his next villain should be none other than Senator Armstrong of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. A US senator from Colorado, Armstrong is outwardly a politician, but in reality, He's the mastermind funding the Desperado Enforcement, the private military company Raiden spends the game dismantling. Armstrong believes that America has become weak and corrupt, controlled by corporations and endless wars fought in the shadows. He strives for a classically masculine form of freedom. He wants to burn the system down and rebuild a nation where only the strong thrive, free of lies and manipulation. To him, survival of the fittest is the ultimate political platform, and he wants to ignite chaos to force humanity into his vision of freedom. And matching his way of thinking in combat, Armstrong is a monster. Thanks to nanomachine augmentation, his body hardens like steel, making him nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. He can tank blows from a cyborg like Raiden and crush armored machines with his bare hands. He's such a cool inverse of Tony, using machines inside his body to destroy the weak and ignite more war, and yet they're foils to one another. They both believe very strongly in a liberty-based society, where the individual is the master of his own destiny and should be able to wield incredible power without having to fork it over to the government. When these two eventually clash, it would be super entertaining seeing them toss around each other through buildings and huck giant missiles at each other, but at the end of the day, Tony is just too smart. He would find a way to deactivate the technology giving Armstrong his powers. And as the Senator is returned to normal, totally confused by what's happening, Tony would have a simple answer. Nanomachines, son. I shut them off. And finally, Tony is a futurist. He's all about embracing progress and pushing the bounds of what the human mind and the technology we create are capable of. For that reason, I think he's a perfect matchup for my next villain, the Reapers from Mass Effect. The Reapers are one of the most chilling portrayals of cosmic horror in gaming, wrapped inside a sleek sci-fi shell. At their core, they are ancient, sentient starships, giant, incomprehensibly advanced machines that have existed for millions of years. Each one is essentially a living weapon of mass destruction, with intelligence on par or above any organic civilization. Their true purpose is to enforce a galactic cycle. Every 50,000 years, they emerge from deep space, wipe out any advanced organic species currently thriving, and then retreat, leaving behind only scattered survivors and ruins. They operate on a terrifying but logical motivation. The Reapers believe this cycle of extermination preserves order in the galaxy, preventing organics from creating synthetic life that might spiral out of control and annihilate everything. In their minds, they're like space janitors, carrying out a grim duty for the greater good. They can devastate entire fleets of starships with ease, indoctrinate organic life forms by subtly rewriting their minds, and harvest species to create new Reapers in their image. The cold inevitability of them, combined with their sheer scale and intellect, makes them less of an enemy and more of a force of nature, kind of like Galactus, one that embodies the terrifying idea that progress itself inevitably summons destruction. Which is why, exactly why, pitting them up against Earth's premier futurist is such a cool idea. Tony would see the Reapers as justification for his mindset about building a suit of armor around the world, the endgame level threat he spent years preparing for. And watching him scramble to source the greatest minds of the world, Reed Richards, T'Challa, Hank Pym, to prepare a gigantic countermeasure for this seemingly inevitable force of cosmic death, all as a way of thematically defending his philosophy of advancement against a force specifically designed to stifle it? Mwah! Chef's kiss. I need to see it happen. Moving on to our next hero, Dr. Stephen Strange is Earth's Sorcerer Supreme, our #1 defender against all threats magical and mystical. Originally a vain and conceited surgeon, Strange lost the fine motor function in his hands in a terrible car crash and searched the whole world for a fix, until eventually turning away from modern medicine into the realm of magic. Studying under the Ancient One, he quickly became one of the Earth's greatest sorcerers, and learning humility in this new lifestyle, decided not to return to his life of luxury, instead using his new magical ability to protect the innocent. As Sorcerer Supreme, Stephen Strange has access to countless mystical spells, artifacts, and tools, like his Cloak of Levitation that lets him levitate and fly, or the Eye of Agamotto, an amulet that can dispel lies to show him the truth. He often calls upon great extra-dimensional beings to harness their powers, like Sidorak or Watum. Doctor Strange is super fun because the character is intelligent, but he plays in a totally different arena than other geniuses of the Marvel world, and so his best stories are about him peeling back the layers of a mystery steeped in magical misdirection and layers of complexity, ultimately discovering a solution no one else would ever think of. I'm not just saying this because Benedict Cumberbatch played both Strange and Sherlock Holmes. He really does excel in battling villains that operate more like a puzzle box than a traditional boss battle, which is why I'm discounting my first, and probably your first thought as well, Ganondorf. The Demon King from The Legend of Zelda is an incredibly powerful magician, and it would be fun to see Strange tangle with him, but I think my other choices are better, and certainly more creative. But don't worry, we'll come back to the Demon King in a later section. For now, I wanted to find villains that will force Strange to contend with time, reality, and the bounds of all that which we can conceive. First up, the rotting half of a dead god, Mephiles the Dark from Sonic the Hedgehog. One of the central antagonists of Sonic 06, he was born when Shadow the Hedgehog shattered the seal on the ancient god Solaris during an experiment at the Space-Time Research Lab. Solaris split into two beings, Iblis, the raw destructive flames, and Mephiles, the cold calculating consciousness. Mephiles is chillingly calm, manipulative, and outright sadistic, with a motivation of absolute nihilism. Mephiles despises humanity, time itself, and ultimately seeks to reunite with Iblis to reform Solaris and erase all of existence. He's unique in that he lacks a physical form, existing as a living shadow that can slip through dimensions. He takes the corrupted form of Shadow the Hedgehog because that's the first being he sees, but I can see Mephiles in the world of Marvel taking the shape of whoever or whatever interrupted the Solaris project, maybe Strange himself. And as for abilities, Mephiles spends most of his time completely incorporeal, a shadow that can only whisper in the ear of those around him, like the demon Mephistopheles he was named after, convincing good-natured people to unknowingly bring about the end of the world. Mephiles would use his temporal portals to travel up and down the timeline, looking for opportunities to release the sealed Iblis and ascend to godhood. Strange would need to track him down, finding the disturbances he causes in history, then traveling there to find whoever Mephiles was manipulating to do his dirty work. This would be a great chance to see Doctor Strange battle against Marvel characters from all through history who are being misled by Mephiles. Maybe a previous Black Panther, one of the Iron Fists, or what about Captain America in the 1940s? All while keeping his true identity a secret as to not damage the structure of the timeline. I think Mephiles is a very fun threat for Strange, one that challenges his mind and mastery of time, but also can only be defeated by sealing him away using some magical means. And of course, if Mephiles succeeds and the superdimensional Solaris is born again, Strange would need to pull out all the stops and all the favors he's cashed with deities to put the sun god down. And once Doctor Strange returns to the present after defeating Mephiles, he would notice some discrepancies with the world. Subtle little changes that could maybe be explained by his time travel shenanigans, but things become perfectly clear once every person in the world age 99 suddenly disappears into a cloud of rose petals, and an enormous spectral woman shows up out in the center of the ocean to paint a giant 99 on a mysterious stone pillar. The Paintress from Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, this game just came out this year, so huge spoiler warning. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to this timestamp. The Paintress is introduced as a mysterious, almost divine figure whose actions define the entire world of Expedition 33. Each year, she ascends to the monolith and paints a single number, and every person who reaches that age vanishes from existence, erased in an event known as the Gamage. In the game, entire generations live with the dread of the next number. No one fully understands her motives or why she paints the numbers, but her ritual defines the calendar of despair that the world lives under. Doctor Strange would set out on a mission to contact her, traversing the ocean and her magical barriers that prevent his portals from working properly, battling the Nevrons, inhuman monsters created by the Paintress's own brush, until he finally reaches her monolith. There, he would try and communicate with her, but unable to, they would clash. In one of the coolest magical showdowns maybe ever, Strange creating phantom copies of himself while she throws meteors down at him. He transforms them into a cloud of butterflies, so she returns the favor by tearing open the fabric of reality to rain stars down on his head. Can you tell I've imagined this a lot? At the end of it, Strange would learn what our protagonists do in the game. The Paintress is a woman named Aline Desandra with the power to create and capture worlds within paintings. Aline is a grieving mother. She went mad after the loss of her son and created a world where no one else would ever have to die again, because she saw something terrible coming. The Gamage isn't her way of destroying humanity, it's a warning of the only people she's able to protect from the far more sinister forces trying to annihilate all of reality. As Strange peers into her mind to learn this, he would finally understand and realize what he has to do. He would put the Paintress to sleep, sealing away her magical powers and getting her to an institution that can help her become mentally stable. And as her painted fiction bleeds away, Strange would see, filling up the sky, the horrible reality Aline was trying to protect the Earth from. Strange's final foe, Gygus. The final antagonist of Earthbound, Gygus is extremely unsettling. In the game Mother, Gygus was once recognizable as an alien raised by human parents, an invader from another planet conflicted about his allegiances, as he loved his human mother Maria, but was compelled by his species to attack the planet. By the time we get to Earthbound, he's transformed into something almost incomprehensible, described as the embodiment of evil itself, a presence so distorted by power that he can no longer think or act in human terms, implied to be some entity from beyond existence who had simply been using Gygus of Mother as a vessel. The game presents him as an anomalous force you can't wrap your mind around. You never actually fight his body, just a storm of chaotic visuals and garbled text that feels less like a boss battle and more like a breakdown of reality. He takes the twisting shape of a baby in the womb and shares cryptic messages like "it hurts" and "it's not right," implying he's like a living force of the trauma experienced by a child who died in the womb. Gygus overwhelms the player with attacks that cannot be grasped, like a cosmic nightmare he cannot be understood or negotiated with. But then again, that's what everyone said about Dormammu, and even he was made to bargain by the Sorcerer Supreme. I love Gygus as the final villain for Strange because he captures the feeling of wild psychedelic insanity Jack Kirby infused into the original comics. He's a reality-bending foe beyond the bounds of the conceptual that only Stephen Strange could ever hope to understand, let alone defeat. As for how Strange would actually go about doing that, he'd need to comb through his gigantic backlog of connections to greater cosmic beings, drawing upon their power, trying to use the strength of Sidorak or the Living Tribunal to banish this monstrosity. But when that doesn't work, he'd be forced to use his most creative and risky solution, Aline Desandra. By introducing the grieving mother with the power to create eternal fictions, to the traumatized cosmic infant wailing for the loving embrace of his mother, I think Gygus would find contentment within the confines of the Paintress's final painting, of a mother and son finally reunited, just as the Doctor ordered. Now, things are getting a little too high concept. Let's come back down to earth with some simple hack and slash action. Wolverine is one of Marvel's most iconic anti-heroes, the rough and tumble booze-chugging biker with knives in his fists and centuries of trauma buried deep beneath his gruff demeanor. On the surface, he's your classic tough guy, a grizzled brawler with a metal skeleton and a healing factor that lets him walk away from wounds that would kill anyone else. Now known as Logan, he was born as James Howlett in the 19th century and lived through a dozen wars, inhumane experiments, and decades of manipulation. The Weapon X program coated his bones with adamantium, turning him into a living weapon, and since then he's been an assassin, bounty hunter, crime lord, superhero, and mutant rights activist. But through it all, he's just someone trying to find peace, protect the people he cares about, and move beyond the horrors of his past. Whether serving on the X-Men, fighting solo, or mentoring younger mutants, he's always looking for a fun fight, a pretty lady, or a cigar. Good Wolverine villains will challenge him physically, offering a threat despite his healing factor, and able to contend with his claws that can slice through just about anything. They should also play on his past, act as a dark mirror to remind Logan about the many sins that he's committed, or an obstacle for him to overcome so he can put that past behind him. And finally, a good Wolverine villain is often a real bastard, somebody totally sick in the head, so it's satisfying when Logan finally gets to slice him up. First up, we need to find a good replacement for Sabretooth, probably Wolverine's most iconic foe, the one who tracks him down just to make his life hell because he can. That kind of cruelty is a great way of highlighting how Logan is actually a hero, despite how gruff and violent he acts. But I gotta warn ya, my choice to fill that role might seem out of left field. Ridley from Super Metroid. He's easily Samus' most personal nemesis, a dragon-like alien space pirate with razor wings, a barbed tail, and a taste for destruction. Ridley is the creature who killed Samus' parents during a raid when she was a child. His history with Samus makes every encounter between the two deeply personal. He's fast, can fly, breathes plasma, and is deceptively strong. Even when destroyed, he always comes back in some new form. Meta Ridley, Omega Ridley, or a cloned resurrection, meaning he's a great physical challenge for Wolverine, and even if he does get diced up, he'll never stop hunting Logan down. As for why, I think if Ridley were to raid Earth, he would want to steal valuable weapons and technology. I can see his pirates finding and raiding the Weapon X program, while Wolverine was having his skeleton infused. Ridley breaking in and slaughtering the scientists, but not stopping the procedure. His sadistic nature would let it happen, then release a freshly tortured Wolverine just to challenge himself. I think Ridley would come away the victor in their first fight, but just barely, and decide that Logan is his new favorite plaything, stopping by Earth every few years to check in on him, kill anyone he's close to, and have a battle to the death to pass the time. Ridley would represent how the past always comes back to haunt you, and our traumas are something we must learn to live with, not escape from. Which leads me to my next pick for Logan, that he'd run into during one of his motorcycle trips across the country, as he makes a wrong left turn and passes through the quiet, foggy town of Silent Hill. Pyramid Head, also known as the Red Pyramid Thing, appears in Silent Hill 2 as a hulking executioner with a massive blade and a featureless, angular helmet that hides any trace of humanity. A huge juggernaut that follows you around with only the intent to brutally kill you, he's essentially the living embodiment of the protagonist, James Sunderland's, guilt and desire to be punished. Throughout the game, Pyramid Head relentlessly stalks James, murdering other creatures and assaulting victims ruthlessly, but each attack is tied to James' psyche. Every encounter is a reflection of his inner torment over his wife's death, and Pyramid Head functions like a twisted mirror, forcing James to confront what he's done. Pyramid Head is unstoppable. He shrugs off attacks, wields the impossibly heavy great knife with ease, and moves with a kind of deliberate inevitability. As Logan rides into town and first encounters Pyramid Head, I can see him shrugging off the threat of the monster, but taking it much more seriously when a slash from his great knife doesn't heal. Silent Hill is a cursed place, a reflection of the psyche of those who enter it. The laws of reality don't operate like they should in a place like this, and so Wolverine would be placed in a rare scenario where he is the hunted instead of the hunter. He'd need to utilize his animal instincts to stay on his toes, escaping attacks from Pyramid Head and finding places to hide, while tending to his scrapes and cuts that refuse to close up here. I think this sort of condition would make Logan's fights so much more intense and exciting. He'd always be choosing to hide and ambush the monster with his claws instead of his normal strategy of jumping in head first. And of course, Logan can't heal, his blades also can't cut Pyramid Head either. Every action he takes would lead him further and further into despair, until he finally figures it out. The monster represents his guilt. The executioner is a reflection of himself, for the brutal murders he carried out through his history as a soldier, assassin, and bounty hunter. And here, now, the only way to escape Silent Hill is to accept his sins and forgive himself for them. I love Pyramid Head for Wolverine because he would offer an awesome physical threat, but also operate as an opportunity for him to finally confront his centuries of trauma and heal from it, stepping out from the shadow of Weapon X and into the light of the X-Men, leaving Silent Hill and moving into the future. The far, far future. For my final Wolverine villain, I wanted to explore who he'd fight as Old Man Logan, 50 years from now in an apocalyptic America ravaged by war, supervillains, and nuclear fallout. Wolverine has now aged more than 200 years and is finally starting to see the effects of that age, just in time to face his final foe, the Master from Fallout. He's both man and monster, fused into something far stranger. Once, he was known as Richard Grey, a doctor who survived the nuclear apocalypse and stumbled into a vat of the forced evolutionary virus, a retrovirus designed to rewrite human DNA to cause evolution into something stronger and smarter. His colleagues assumed he died and left the vat alone, but instead of dying, his body and mind mutated beyond recognition, transforming him into a grotesque amalgamation of flesh with the ability to absorb other beings. Every new creature the Master absorbed, he gained their biomass along with their memories and consciousness, evolving into a psychic monstrosity. He soon even fused with the computers of his underground lab, renaming the space his cathedral, where he performed experiments on humans, turning them into mutants. He believed mutation was humanity's next step, a way to survive the apocalypse and fix the world, all led by his incredible hive mind filled with delusions of grandeur. And of course, in Marvel's post-society, he would set his eyes on Logan, the perfect creature to absorb and add to his mutant collective, offering him the gift of eternal healing and immortality. Wolverine would be drawn in by the Master, the villain kidnapping several children and holding them hostage in his cathedral to use as bait. Of course, Logan would break in to save them, slicing through super mutant hordes and battle back the waves of psychic manipulation, his weakened body and lessened regeneration slowing him down and making him susceptible to attacks that he would have just shrugged off a few decades prior. I think the Master offers for Logan one final mission: to take down the sort of nasty, corrupt, ideological evil that he'd known for centuries, victimizing the innocent with the excuse of progress. I think the Master would get his wires and tentacles wrapped around Wolverine just as he managed to help the children escape, and as he's about to be absorbed into the hive mind, Logan would jam his claws into the cathedral's machines, electrifying his metal skeleton, frying the Master and his super mutants to a crisp. One final act of rebellion by a man who has more than earned his rest. Damn, that got kinda dark. Like and subscribe! Seriously though, if you're enjoying this video, drop a like and consider checking out my other entries in this series. In my last video, I picked out anime villains to fight the heroes from DC Comics. That whole playlist is right here. And if you really like what I do on this channel, creative writing exercises with your favorite characters, why not join my channel membership? It's the best way to support me so that I can spend more time writing and paying editors, and you'll get access to all my videos weeks earlier than everyone else. $5 and up members even get to see videos that I will never share with the public. Now, don't that just tickle your fancy? No? Your fancy remains untickled? Alright, I'll go back to the video now. The Incredible Hulk is deceptively simple. Big mad green guy who smashed bad guy real good. But he's actually a fairly layered and complex character under the surface. Dr. Robert Bruce Banner is a rather timid and agreeable scientist who specialized in gamma radiation, but after an accident irradiated him with the energies he spent his life studying, the beast inside was unleashed. The Hulk is a second personality living inside Banner, a monster fueled by repressed rage that was created from Bruce's time growing up under an abusive and violent father. Given life on the outside of his psyche, the Hulk is essentially a walking gamma bomb with the mind of a pissed-off toddler. He seeks to smash anything and everything that gets in his way, but at the end of the day, what he really wants is to be accepted instead of feared. Aww. Anyway, Hulk can punch apart planets, shrug off the vacuum of space, regenerate his body from nearly any injury, and if you somehow manage to break through his impossibly strong skin, he can still tussle with gods like Thor and Sentry. As the Hulk gets angrier, his body generates more and more gamma radiation, making him even stronger and more durable, and of course, more volatile. Hulk can get so strong that it makes you wonder how. His body is capable of releasing so much more energy than the initial gamma explosion that created him, and that's because of a secret very few know. Gamma rays are actually a force fundamentally linked to the One Below All, a dark reflection of the God of all things, inherently tied to negative emotions and concepts like hate, entropy, and annihilation. Because he feels anger so strongly, the Hulk is essentially channeling the power of hell into his giant green fists. And this terrifying beast is always waiting to come out, itching at the surface of Banner's psyche, only released when he allows himself to get angry. Hulk villains are usually big bruisers like him who can stand up to a slugfest, like Red Hulk, Absorbing Man, or Abomination. We'll definitely want at least one pick who can match him that way, but Hulk is also a simple creature and tends to fall victim to manipulation, like Scarlet Witch did to him in Age of Ultron. Psychic and super genius villains will often try to steer the beast and use him for their own goals, which leads me to my first pick. I told you we find a way to get back to him. Ganondorf Dragmire is the central nemesis of the Legend of Zelda series, the Dark King who refuses to die. He originates as the sole male born into the Gerudo tribe, marking him as destined for power. But Ganondorf stretched his ambitions further, all across Hyrule. What defines him most is his hunger for the Triforce of Power, one of the 3 sacred relics that embody the god's essence. With it, he gains near immortality, overwhelming strength, and sorcery that lets him warp into monstrous forms like Ganon, the beastly pig demon. He wants to bring glory to his desert people, to conquer Hyrule, bend it to his will, and prove himself the rightful ruler of the world. Both a brute and a sorcerer, he commands legions of monsters, wields dark magic, and in direct combat, he's every bit Link's equal, swordsman, strategist, and powerhouse. But more than that, he's thematically inevitable. Every time he's defeated, killed, or sealed away, his dark magic and connection to the Triforce of Power allows him to return. As we eventually learn, this is because Ganon is actually the reincarnation of Demise, the ancient demon king who challenged the goddess of time and attempted to burn down the entire world. Ganondorf's malice is never-ending, and his corruptive magic is often used to transform people into monsters, or overpower their minds. Now, I know some of you probably don't think that this is a good pick for Hulk, and would have preferred I put him up against Doctor Strange instead of probably Mephiles, honestly. But, to all of you naysayers, I ask this. Have you ever considered that both Hulk and Ganondorf are green? Didn't think so. Case closed. If Ganondorf existed in the world of Marvel, he would lead his desert people on a crusade to conquer the rest of humanity, but be stopped by a lone Hulk wandering the sandy plains trying to escape the military. Ganondorf would use his magic to corrupt Banner's mind, and turn him into his army's greatest weapon. I don't think anything would enrage Hulk more than waking up in his stupor to see he was used like a tool to conquer and destroy the lives of innocents, the public losing their trust in him and seeing him as nothing more than a monster once again. Of course, he would go to confront Ganondorf immediately, tearing through his swarms of bokoblins and redeads, and when the Demon King tries his mind manipulation again, Hulk would be too angry for it to work. I think this would be a sick fight, Ganondorf throwing fireballs and flying around to make his attacks with his blade, while the Hulk gets madder and madder with every blow. Eventually, the Desert Man would turn into the giant pig demon Ganon, and the two would have a real clash of fists, shaking the earth beneath them. The Hulk would get so angry that each punch would be enough to kill Ganondorf, but the Triforce would keep him alive, which would only make Hulk even angrier, and eventually, he'd come to the realization that a villain like this can only be defeated by sealing him away with magic, and understanding that, Hulk would pick him up and throw him into outer space. I think Ganon would float around up there for a while, eventually passed up by an enormous wooden ship soaring through the stars and towards the Earth, helmed by a very different evil tyrant. Bowser, King of the Koopas from the Mario series, is usually portrayed as the big, fire-breathing bad guy who kidnaps Princess Peach and challenges Mario. He's a giant turtle dragon monster with pointy horns, claws, teeth, even a spiked shell. But depending on the game, he shifts between menacing tyrant, bumbling foil, and even reluctant ally. At his core, Bowser is all about ambition and ego. He wants power, he wants recognition, and he wants to crush the Mushroom Kingdom under his foot. He's usually out to kidnap their monarch, Princess Peach, partially because of his very real crush on her, but also because it's about asserting dominance, dragging Mario into battle again and again as proof of who deserves to wear the crown. Bowser's capabilities make him a credible threat even beyond the cartoonish tone of the games. He's massive, physically overwhelming, breathes fire, commands an army of soldiers with varying abilities, and can wield magic when he needs to. Boss fights with him range from straightforward clashes to giant kaiju-scale battles where he towers over the player. I think Bowser would be the perfect thing to throw at the Hulk, who's down on his luck, who just had the world turned against him. A loudmouth monster who can take his punches and is totally asking for them. Bowser would try to make the Earth his, sending his forces to take over our governments, but Hulk would leap into the sky and cling to his giant magic ship, climbing up the hull looking for someone to brawl with. I think Bowser and Hulk would start out absolutely hating each other, but quickly grow to appreciate one another. They're both big bruisers who everyone's afraid of, who just want to be loved. and they both revel in a big ol' fight. Their punches would send shockwaves that shatter everything in sight, each getting angrier as the other refuses to go down. And I do think Bowser's underlings would have some magic that could give Hulk a hard time. You'd have to dodge the magic spells of Kamek while grabbing bullet bills out of the sky and tossing them back at the sender. In the end, I think Hulk would grab a thwomp in each hand and use them like giant boxing gloves to pummel Bowser into submission. Eventually, he would send the Koopa King packing, and he'd leave with his tail between his legs, but promising to return for another good fight with the Hulk anytime he feels like it. And having saved the planet from an alien invasion, Hulk would regain a little bit of his reputation in the eyes of the public, which is why he would be approached by President Thunderbolt Ross, not to capture him, but to ask for his help in defeating the current greatest threat to the world, the forces of Hell. The icon of sin is the towering face of Hell itself in the Doom series, and it's one of the most imposing final bosses in all of gaming. First appearing in Doom 2, it's a monstrous godlike entity that manifests as a colossal demonic head fused into the walls of Hell, endlessly spawning legions of monsters to rip you to shreds. In terms of scale and presentation, it's less of a single enemy and more like the embodiment of Hell's will itself to overwhelm and consume everything, but it evolves past being just a giant face. In Doom Eternal, the icon of sin grows to become a full-blown apocalyptic threat, a towering titan resurrected on planet Earth, striding through ruined cities like a demon Godzilla. In that form, it's the climax of Hell's invasion, a creature so massive it reshapes the battlefield with every step it takes. It's a skyscraper-sized, goat skull-headed, cyborg demon beast that wants to drag every living soul into damnation. Can you think of a better target to point the Hulk at? As the Earth's mightiest military forces fail to prevent the gates of Armageddon from opening and letting the legions of satanic beasts pour out, the Hulk crashes onto the scene like a meteor, landing with an earth-shattering smash that annihilates the nearest wave of demons instantly. The icon throwing fireballs the size of buses, each one detonating like a tactical nuke, all while the Hulk tears through the remains of this ruined city like a rabid pit bull with his eyes locked on the nearest toddler. The real spectacle of this fight would be Hulk dealing with the icon's enormous size. Maybe Banner would stick his hands into the earth, tearing apart the ground to open up a giant canyon for the icon to fall into, while the demon tears off pieces of its cybernetic shell to unleash the hellfire trapped within. And as it blasts Hulk with the force of a star, turning the world around them both to ash, Hulk would emerge unscathed, smiling. The icon of sin is the very essence of Hell itself, but the Hulk's power comes from something even deeper than Hell, from something below even that place, below all. Yes, I am saying that the Hulk would beat the champion of Hell with an even more devilish power, and it would be the sickest thing anyone has ever seen, ever. But okay, my fantasy choreography fanfiction is over now, I promise. Let's go back to basics, good old-fashioned American values. Captain America is the United States homegrown super soldier, originally scrawny military wannabe Steve Rogers. His unbreakable will and fighting spirit to join the army in World War II won him a spot on the super soldier program, a secret project using an experimental serum and Vita rays to grant a human being peak physicality and mental acuity. Steve ended up being the only successful subject, transformed from a tiny twig of a man into the powerhouse wrapped in red, white, and blue, Captain America. He spent several years fighting on the front lines in Europe, taking down some of Germany's most dangerous secret projects under the occult experimental division Hydra. But after being frozen in Arctic ice for decades, Steve awoke here in the present, a man out of time, bringing his old-fashioned American values to a much more complicated and dangerous world. Cap is an icon. He's Marvel's emblem of resilience, morality, and leadership. But what makes him compelling is how those qualities are tested. He believes in standing up to bullies in every form, whether it's a back alley thug or a tyrannical empire. His motivation comes from that deep moral compass, to protect the innocent, to lead by example, and to keep fighting even when the odds are absolutely impossible. Something he does with his unmatched physicality, Olympic-level athleticism, top-notch fighting skills, muscles that never get sore, a mind that never grows old, and a shield made of proto-adamantium, a special metal blend that's practically unbreakable. Yes, MCU fans, fans, if you've ever read a comic, you would know that his shield is not vibranium. I got way too many comments trying to tell me how dumb I was on my first Marvel video in this series. Sorry. To pick good Cap villains, I need to consider the different eras he was active as a superhero, when he was a soldier, a spy, and an Avenger. Because he's so pure, I'm less interested in bad guys that act as foils. I'm really looking for pure evil monsters that reflect what a perfect human specimen like Steve could be if he didn't start out as just a good-hearted kid from Brooklyn. Speaking of starting out, it's only fitting that my first choice is one that also comes from the 1940s. General Wilhelm Death's Head Strass from the Wolfenstein series is the chief scientist of the Nazi regime, and unlike the stereotypical shouting generals, Death's Head is cold, quiet, and unnervingly polite. That calm exterior hides a ruthless mind responsible for some of the most grotesque experiments in the alternate history of Wolfenstein. He takes human beings, soldiers, prisoners, even his own comrades, and reshapes them into mechanical abominations. Cybernetic super soldiers, and nightmarish war machines, using people as raw material, reducing them to tools in his pursuit of progress. He's only interested in efficiency and results. Unlike the other members of the German Axis, he's not actually all that interested in their supremacist ideology, but by ambition and curiosity. He believes science justifies everything, and the current regime gives him the resources and freedom to indulge in his darkest experiments. In that way, he's actually scarier than a zealot. You can't reason him out of his choices through empathy. I think the best example is when he forces the protagonist Blazkowicz to choose which of his own fellow soldiers he'll use his scalpel on to remove their eyes. Yeah, dark. Now, if you don't know, the Wolfenstein games take place in an alternate history where the Axis powers won and took over the world. The games spanning decades where the heroes fight back against the cyborg and zombie Nazi threats. In a world where Hydra never existed, I can see Cap defeating Death's Head for good during World War II in place of the enemies like Red Skull or Baron Zemo. The Allies would then win like normal. But when he's unfrozen in the modern era, you would be shocked to see a new Death's Head here in the present, from an alternate universe where the Germans won, now using their super tech to travel to alternate dimensions and spread their empire. Here, Cap would really be tested, the super soldier serum running through his blood, helping him power through undead monsters with laser weapons, giant mechanical super constructions, and whatever unspeakable evils the Mad General could think up. But at the end of the day, he'd kick Death's Head's ass and probably end up liberating his whole dimension in the process. Of course, political despots aren't just a relic of the past. M. Bison, the iconic villain of the Street Fighter series, is the perfect blend of martial arts menace and megalomaniacal tyrant. Officially the leader of the criminal syndicate Shadaloo, Bison is a would-be world conqueror obsessed with showing the planet that he is the most powerful, and that his power makes him our rightful ruler. And he backs up his brute force approach to world domination with supernatural abilities, like his mastery of Psycho Power, a dark energy drawn from negative emotions. This power lets him unleash devastating moves like the Psycho Crusher. He can levitate, teleport at will, and overwhelm even the strongest martial artists, bringing them to their knees. But he's so consumed by this power that he discards his own humanity. As it turns out, Psycho Power is corruptive. It destroys his body from the inside, and so he needs to steal the bodies of other powerful fighters and burn them hollow, opening up the body for his own evil soul to inhabit it while his old body crumbles away. For a while, he used clones of himself to incarnate into every time he was defeated, but I think he would be more interested in securing a body that would never need to be replaced, the body of a super soldier. M. Bison would target Cap, sending the forces of Shadaloo to capture him, and when they fail, he would appear to take Steve's body himself. I think this would be an awesome fight, a champion of liberty versus a pure evil dictator, Cap using his shield to bounce back blasts of Psycho Power while he lands blow after blow on Bison. Honestly, I kinda want to see a world where Steve Rogers enters the Street Fighter tournament instead of Guile, but that's not what this video is about. Once Captain America manages to put down Bison, the megalomaniac's dark spirit would definitely leave his old vessel and try to take over the hero's body, but the dark emotions of his Psycho Power wouldn't be anywhere near enough to overwhelm Cap's will. Bison would leave in shame, definitively beaten. And it just feels so good to watch Steve win against evil, to be pushed to his limits and not surrender, which is how I picked out his final villain and greatest challenge from the gaming world. The Flood from Halo are a less traditional villain and more a nightmare force of nature, an entire species built around consumption and assimilation. They are a parasitic life form that spreads like wildfire, infecting sentient beings, rewriting their biology, and turning them into grotesque extensions of the hive mind. They're essentially intelligent body horror at work. At their peak, the Flood operate under a grave mind, a massive central intelligence that strategizes, manipulates, and even philosophizes while directing the swarm across the stars. In the lore, the Flood are the ultimate galactic threat, powerful enough that the Forerunners, the ancient rulers of the galaxy, couldn't stop them with armies or technology. The only solution was the Halo Array, a desperate superweapon designed to wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy, starving the Flood of potential hosts. That alone says everything about their scale. They're so dangerous, the only way to stop them is to end life itself. Only a true war hero like Master Chief is equipped to defeat them, both on the battlefield and in the final moments when the Halo Array is about to fire. But if there were one man who could take his place, it's gotta be Steve Rogers. I can see the Flood as a group of spores that landed here decades ago and were contained by the government, but have now breached containment and are spreading fast. First of all, seeing Cap sprinting down a battlefield, leading an army of soldiers against this alien force, beating the Flood lifeforms to death with his shield as they invade and multiply, Steve trying to protect his men while also seeking out and destroying the Gravemind connecting them all, that would be peak. Beyond that, I really like how the Flood represent an ideological opposite to Captain America. Death's Head and Bison were both tyrannical, but the Flood is inherently a collectivist force that strips members of all autonomy and individuality. Pitting that up against the man who represents liberty and individualism of America is such a perfect fit. And the best part, as Cap makes it to the Gravemind, he sees the Flood evolve into the point of speaking. They start to mock him, tempting him with promises of unity, and reminding the Captain that resistance only delays the inevitable. He cannot stop them forever. But of course, Cap would just shrug it off. He might not be able to do this forever, but he can definitely do it all day. Finally storming in is Thor, god of thunder. Rooted in Norse mythology, Thor in Marvel Comics is the son of Odin, the all-father of Asgard, and he's armed with Mjolnir, the enchanted hammer that grants him dominion over thunder, lightning, and flight. An immortal warrior without equal, a god who can shatter mountains, go toe-to-toe with cosmic entities, and stand among the Avengers as their heaviest hitter. Early in life, he was arrogant, reckless, and more concerned with glory than responsibility, all due to his incredible power and privilege as a god. Because of this, Odin cast him down to Earth to learn humility, sealing away his strength within Mjolnir until he was worthy to lift it once again. And that dynamic between pride and worthiness has defined the character ever since. Every time Thor lifts Mjolnir, it's a display of his character, his worthiness to wield it. Thor's power exists to protect and nurture the mortals of Midgard and defend the legacy of Asgard, not to feed his ego. It's all about balancing his godhood with humanity. And so, his best villains usually represent the inverse of that struggle. His brother Loki views mortals as cattle to serve him and worship him. Gore the God Butcher sees all gods as uncaring despots, kinda like Loki. So when picking villains for Thor, I want those who can play with his unique nature as an immortal and heavenly responsibility and power. My first thought, and honorable mention, is Zeus from the God of War series. It seems like a slam dunk. Thunder God versus Thunder God. Thor has strong virtues and cares for mortals, while Zeus is strung up in fear of his fate, violently playing with the lives of those beneath him like Kratos. But that's the thing. Zeus's whole villainy in God of War is him trying to prevent the prophecy of his son killing him. And I only got rid of the villains of the Marvel Universe. Odin is still Thor's papa, so Zeus and Thor just wouldn't have that personal connection to clash over. Instead, I decided to go with someone who'd have the perfect thematic dichotomy. Thor is a god who experienced being mortal. He should fight a mortal grasping at the angelic. Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII is one of gaming's most legendary villains, a perfect storm of elegance, tragedy, and menace. Once the greatest soldier of Shinra, the giant energy-producing megacorporation and weapons manufacturer, he was admired as a hero. He was respected, unmatched in combat, and seemingly destined for greatness. but that image shattered when he uncovered the truth of his origins. He was actually born from experiments with Genova, an alien life form tied to ancient calamities. Realizing he was synthetic rather than truly human, Sephiroth spirals into madness, convinced that he is destined to rule as the rightful heir of the planet's power. So he seeks to split open the planet with a gigantic meteor, then merge with the life stream that leaks out, the planet's spiritual energy, to ascend beyond mortality and control all life. In his mind, he's not destroying the world, he's claiming it, reshaping it under his will. And if that's not enough, he's certainly got the combat chops to tangle with Thor. With his impossibly long Masamune blade, mastery of magic, and later his ability to manifest monstrous forms, let's just say there's a reason his theme song has become so iconic. Just picture Sephiroth calling down the meteor with the black materia, Thor flying up into the sky to try and stop it from colliding with New York, he and Sephiroth having a battle on the surface of the meteor as it rips down towards Earth, Thor managing to strike it hard enough with Mjolnir to redirect it into the ocean, and then we could get an ending we never saw in Final Fantasy VII. Sephiroth managing to absorb the life stream that seeps out of the ocean, ascending to a new level of godly power only another god could match. Yeah, I'd buy a ticket to see that. Next up, I wanted to play with the melancholy of Thor's immortality. He's been alive for thousands of years and seen many mortal friends pass on, but that includes some who were almost as immortal as he, just barely missing the mark. Star Scourge Radahn from Elden Ring was once a proud demigod. Son of Radagon and Renala, he was a key player in the tangled royal family of the Lands Between. From a young age, he was obsessed with strength and war, studying gravity magic so he could better wield his colossal frame. He used that magic to hold back the stars themselves, freezing the night sky in place, and to carry the weight of his beloved horse, Leonard, so the tiny steed could still bear his giant body into battle. He was one of the most feared generals of his age, leading armies in wars of the demigods. But his story takes a tragic turn after the shattering of the Elden Ring. Radahn succumbed to the rot from Melania in their legendary battle, and his mind was left broken. By the time the Tarnished meets him, he's a maddened giant, aimlessly devouring corpses on the scarred battlefield of Caelid. I think it makes total sense that Thor and Radahn would have been the best of friends long ago. The Lands Between, a small portion of one of the 9 realms, on Yggdrasil instead of the Erd Tree. The two of them partaking in many battles together, using their godly powers to vanquish evildoers. But after a very long absence, Thor would discover the shattered Elden Ring and his old friend overtaken by the rot, a shell of his former self. I think it would be a tragic yet epic battle, Thor trying to get through to his old friend, now reduced to a monster to slay. He would do so with conviction and be filled with sorrow and fury, looking to take it out on whoever shattered the Elden Ring and caused this whole mess. But here, it wasn't Queen Marika. Instead, the great sin was committed by the World Eater. Alduin is the central antagonist of the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and he's the dragon, firstborn of Akatosh, the god of time, and destined to bring about the end of the world. According to the Nords, Alduin is a cosmic inevitability, a force prophesied to devour the world so that it can be reborn. He's worshipped in some eras, feared in others, and utterly convinced of his own complete supremacy. His motivation is twofold: domination in the present, where he seeks to enslave mortals and rule through terror, and fulfillment of the prophecy, where his ultimate role is to consume all of creation. To Alduin, mortals are insignificant, playthings, prey, or servants at best, and this would do little more than piss off Thor. But as the two clash, Thor would be up against incredible power. This dragon has shouts that can summon meteors, release unrelenting force, and even raise other undead dragons to serve beside him. Thor would put up an incredible fight, but Alduin is a god himself, and the dragon god of time who can match Thor's lightning strikes with his own blasts of fire and ice, regenerating instantly from any damage he deals. I think in their first encounter, Alduin would slash Thor to ribbons, tearing out his eye and leaving him to float in space while he flies off to destroy another realm. Recuperating, Thor would set his mind to slaying Alduin, heading to Nidavellir, and having the dwarves craft him a special weapon, one engraved and infused with magic capable of slaughtering the Time God. Instead of Stormbreaker, this axe would be called Dragon Render. Armed with this new weapon and the memories of his dear friend Radahn in his heart, Thor would seek out Alduin, who's moved to Valhalla to consume the souls of the fallen heroes. Here, he would have his final battle with the World Eater, the Thunder God striking down the dragon like a lightning bolt, forcing Alduin to experience mortality for the first and last time. Stay frosty.